Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our special podcast, which is Ethiopia Today. This is first of its kind. Of course, my guest today is not new to the buffet of ideas or Asab Gabata. He is Mr. Faisal Roble. I hope by now some of you have already some acquaintance with him, but if you don't know him, now you know him. So Mr. Faisal is a political commentator, and he's a US-based political commentator who has been actually writing on the Ethiopian political issues, as well as the issues that affect the greater Horn of Africa in general. And for today, we chose a title of Common Traits, but Fragmented Approach. And this, from the topic itself, you might guess where we are heading, but I do not want to preempt it. It's generally that we as Ethiopians have been facing a common trait, but we seldom engage in pointing out those common problems that are facing us, which has turned out to be existential traits, which by existential trait, we mean that the very existence of the polity of the state is in danger. So there is a risk of disintegration. So then on the other hand, even though people are dying and maiming, justice have been denied, there is still active hostilities and a civil war, which is ethnic civil war, going on almost on every part of the country and affecting every aspect of our life, including those in diaspora. Nevertheless, we are not engaging in a common approach and forging a comprehensive policy that might serve as a blueprint for bringing about peace and ensuring justice in Ethiopia. That's it. Welcome, Mr. Faisal Roble. It is a pleasure to have you again.
Thank you very much, Mogus. I really appreciate you inviting me, and I come to you today with a very sad sense of where we are. I mean, when I say sad sense, in the sense that the first time I really came to attend to the issues, political issues, social issues in Ethiopia was in my teenage, like many people, including you and others. And then after so long and so many years to stay and be in the same dark hole, which is captured by the title you gave us today, which is Common Threats and Fragmented Response, or Fragmented Approaches to the Issues that we face, is so catchy, but also so telling of our quagmire and the sad narrative that we all are found today. I mean, today, in about few months, it would be 50 years from the day the Derg took power. People think that, this was just like ancient history, but it was around the corner. And some of the astages and some of the political, social justice issues that we inherited then was transformed to the EPRDF's era and is now being experienced by our people. So it's a very sad story to really come at my age now, hitting 60, to say finally, this country or this region is never getting out of the quagmire. So people like you who came of a later age are still nursing the same issues that we have had, and for you to really raise the issue of the potential danger that we are facing in general, it doesn't come to me with a light note. So thank you very much for welcoming me.
That's great, Mr. Faisal. I couldn't agree more on that point that you have made. Lastly, it is very distressing, discouraging, and even disheartening for me to again recycle basically the same issue which have been raised time and again by the past generation, your own generation, and now you have witnessed the ups and downs and the turns and twists of the Ethiopian political system. And yet again, the political culture remains the same. Now we are speaking the same language of violence, which is actually a perpetuation of a state violence, political violence, And it resulted in the pervasive culture of impunity, which is going to be the main the point of our discussion, which we are going to highlight very shortly. And on top of that, we are still grappling to make sense of what is bedeviling the Ethiopia and the Greater Horn of Africa. And where did we get it wrong? And that is, I think, what lies at the heart of our discussion today. I share the same frustrations with you. Nevertheless, we cannot give up easily. We have to find a way, and this is one of the reasons we came to prepare this special episode on Ethiopia today to discuss the current issues. So, Mr. Faisal, tell me what you have been observing over the last 1 or 2 weeks, because the issue of justice and accountability has become a very hot potato again for a different reason. Of course, it's very distressing. It's not a good news for the victims, and for those who have fallen and who have suffered, and for those who are still suffering and will remain to face state violence and the onset of civil war. So share us your take on this, and we'll proceed.
Yeah. So my take is, you're right. I think this week was a very stressful week for many Ethiopians, but also probably a good week for the Aret Kilo, i.e., in the sense that the human rights agency that was digging deeper into the issues of human rights issues and justice and transitional justice potentially was really put to rest in terms of the funding, and that makes the Ethiopian government happier. It makes those of us who wanted to really see some change and accountability and transparency and a more of a organic, sustainable social justice to take place under the rubric of transitional justice probably are a bit, taken aback. So the death of the ICRI this week was a sad story for us. Now, we probably expected that the West will not do as much as we would like. But I think, so the common threat that we have now is that we have a political system that is not ready to change, that is not ready to address some of the issues that we care about. But at the same time, we have an elite group in the country throughout, inside and outside, who are pursuing their own parochial issue and want to get legitimacy for the parochial issue. In the meanwhile, the government of Ethiopia is regaining some status with the West, some funding potentially very soon with the West. So I think, yeah, the political system is fragmented. The elite group who would have been united at this point in time to seek justice, and probably we will be talking about justice and what we mean and what they have done, they are fragmented. But the common threat, Mogus, that we have today is lack of rule of law and lack of redress, the way to address our social and political justice in the country. And that is here, and that will stay with us for a while, at least in the coming few years.
Yeah, that's a very important point, Mr. Faisal. I would just like to share with you a recent article or news, rather, by the famous French magazine, which is Le Monde. They stated it very perfectly, and why the mandate of the human rights experts of commission on the Ethiopian case. They just said this one. I would like to highlight it a bit. There we go. Impunity. They said, what is the point of renewing a UN commission that neither the Ethiopian government nor the Tigrayan authorities want? The source, which is close to the European Commission, just revealed this little secret. What would you make sense of it? In a sense, it has got to do with the lack of agency, right? In a sense that how can a neighbor would try to extinguish a fire while you are just sleeping in the house which is on fire? So is it lack of diplomacy, or is it lack of common approach? Is it because of apathy? So what is your take on the termination, rather, the termination of the pregnancy of the commission, untimely termination?
So absolutely, I think you're a lawyer and you know this more than I do. If there is no victim bringing a case to the international uh, platforms, you cannot look for a victim to accuse somebody. That's probably what this impunity little note that you posted here is talking about. Tigrinya authorities were the ones who pushed at all levels to get that role, and now they are not. So three forces came here to really kill the ICRI, the United Nations agency that was looking into this. One is the nonchalant or the exit of the process by TPLF. Basically, and I said this in simplest somewhere else, TPLF today and the local administration of Tigray is part of the greater web of Abiy, of the administration. You know, they may not be sitting right now at Kilo, but they are part of the regional administration, all of them reporting to Abiy, seeking, funding or whatever. So the absence of TPLF voice and behind the scenes saying we're not seeking this was one big factor. The second big factor was the Africa Union and the African voices that says leave us alone, we know how to solve our problems. And as much as people may not know, the West loves that, because for them it's easier to deal and satisfy African dictators and autocrats than civil society like us, who are seeking social justice in the true sense of the word. So when African leaders is sitting at the UN, most of them, when they retired looking for international jobs or something else, say leave us alone, we can handle ours, whether we are dictators or autocrats or what have you. They love that, but behind the door they deal with them. And then the third was, I think, a deliberate decision made by the West power corridors to finally say we stabilized to some degree Ethiopia. The big guns are silenced. Tigray is no longer in war. The Amara war is the war in the Amara region is skirmish type, the same as Oromia. We can deal with that slowly. We can limp it along, but let us make sure that Ethiopia doesn't fall apart and work with Abiy. And verbatim, you can hear that from diplomats, Mogas, who say that there is no alternative to the PP and the Arat Kilo administration at this point in time. So the devil that you know is easier to work with. So these three factors basically made the whole United Nations funding to cut at this point in time a more feasible political stance.
Yeah, I can. Thank you very much, Mr. Faisal. I can see also this that you tweeted, I think today, if I'm not mistaken, about the same fact that how you were so dismayed with the fact that the European Union, which was behind the establishment of the Commission itself, ICRI itself. Of course, I have a different line of argument, not so different. You might agree with me that even the very establishment of the Commission was not necessary because that the international community cared enough. It's just because of the active and ruthless, for me, advocacy from the Tigrayan, particularly Tigrayan advocacy networks throughout the world. That is the reason why the international community had to hit towards the need for the establishment of the commission from the outset. That is my understanding. But in any case, I just came across this statement from you, a tweet rather, which says, when the West abandons human rights or fails to prioritize it, at least, it gets political clients in autocratic rulers. Autocrats, in turn, get free rein to purge civilians, suffocate freedom of press, and make reconciliation or national dialogue difficult to attain. Without accountability, governance deteriorates, and the West seems to be comfortable with that. Could you explain on that?
Yes.
For our viewers, of course.
Absolutely. So I think, and I said this, by the way, last week when we went to the State Department, basically, the last time the US seemed to be a little bit serious about human rights was during the Carter administration. From there on, things have gotten worse. During the Bush years, the Clinton years, which watched Somalia going down the drain, and now what we have in Ethiopia, the human rights issue to them is just a side issue. If they can get to work with a dictator or an autocrat, that's easier, because at the end of the day, the US at this point in time, and I don't think they can deny, the measurement for the US to engage third world countries, particularly African countries, are of two: resources that they need, including the market that they need, which Ethiopia has abundant in terms of population size and other sources. And the other item that they care about is the strategic interest and militaristic, and that's why the US military gets the largest. So outside that, it's very minimal in terms of the policymakers of the United States and the West that they care about. So the whole human right issue, it has two constituents, Mogus, in the way that I read. One constituent of the human right is those people who come from the liberal school of thought who advocate for human rights in the third world countries. The other group are opportunistic politicians who are lobbied, as you said, by groups, whether that group is Amara, Tigrenya, or Oromo, depending on the period. And those lobbying groups usually impress their issue with the elected officials, such as congressmen and women, senators, and what have you. And those people most of the time care about funding and the right voting time, if that group is coming to them and helping them in. So these two groups is the ones who really fashion the human rights issue for the West. I think what you can see in the American situation at this point and in the West is that the liberal advocacy groups who are outside the system, who are not politicians, lost in the case of Ethiopia. And the so-called pragmatic realpolitik run by the State Department, by US Congress, are winning in the sense when they weigh those of us who are shouting in the streets versus who are, the government. At this point in time, they feel that the government is paying them off. The only time we will be heard is if the government of the US and the US congressional members get embarrassed through demonstrations, as you said, through heavy, lobbying like the Tigris did, or even the No More movement did, which also at one time was vocal. So human rights is nothing more than a political tool for the West to cajole and shape the third world governments. And with Ethiopia now, they did it. They got to a certain point, and now the air is, let's pull back and let's give Abiy and his team a room to recuperate and to work with us.
Yeah, that's a very interesting perspective. It seems that the realpolitik you mentioned, or prioritizing the national interests of each state, especially that of the United States, which has always been expanding and shrinking depending on each administration. And now the language of human rights, as someone who have studied human rights and is still advocating for human rights, it seems that the international community's failure has become so persistent, and it became some form of culture. You can see the pattern. And as they always either come very late, or once they start it, either it would be aborted, which at some point even exacerbates the situation, or and whenever they intervene by always keeping in mind that their national interest triumphs over the human security. And I would like to stress it, because my principle is that even speaking of the potential disintegration of the state, what is the point when you already lost the population, the constituent element of sovereignty and territorial integrity? I mean, if the population lost integrity, what kind of integrity are you talking about? State integrity, for me, even from the legal point of view, must come after the integrity of the people, which is translated into human security in the modern language. So is it that they are throwing the baby with the bath water, or are they jettisoning it? Or is it that the European Union, which has been at least well known for its normative power and more or less trying to give priority for human security, especially those western part of Europe. They are well known for this principle. Actually, they are the godfather of human security. And it appears that in the middle of nowhere, while there is a shipwreck and there is turbulence, they just left us or throw us under the bus. I don't know even the proper language to use. Is it the European Union is bandwagoning after the United States? Because some people are commenting like that the United States showed some signal a couple of months ago.
Well, even
or
with
what
this
is it
one,
generally?
yeah, or even this one, the U.S. on the record said they were ready and willing not only to fund it but to also support the renewal of this project, the United Nations human rights research. But they said they will not do that on the backs of the African countries. So basically, they were saying they punted this thing to Africans, and African leaders, as you know, is always with the member state that they side. We also dug our own hole. Remember, Mogus, the No More movement, Africa for Africans. At the time, the groups who were lobbying for that didn't think that it will come, the Tigray war will finish, and then the Amara war will start. They never thought. Now, the very same ones that are now in Washington, D.C. and those areas are wondering and now feeling the deep hole. Why am I mentioning this? I think I heard from several congressional members that we visited to at least say we can do something when all of you speak with one voice. That fragmented voices that we had in the past, that we even have now, service both the European and Americans who like to be normative about this issue and lukewarm when they want to do business with the government that's sitting, as well as the government that we like to shed a light on, and it serves them. So I think the European countries, as well as I would say the US government, human rights issue is not a priority. It is not really on the top. They would like to find and have a leadership in Aret Kilo that would work with them well, but also at peace and at ease with its people. If they cannot have that, if that's not possible for Washington, then they would not mind to work with a stable autocrat. Mogus, we need to know that America is a country, and for that matter, Europe, which bandwagons, and I agree with you, with mainly the US on big picture issues, is a country that has sustained a relationship for a long time with dictators like Mobutu Sese Seko, Hofat Banya of Ivory Coast, the Gambian president whose heritage and hairs have been overthrown in the last few months. So America has no qualms with working with dictators, and even with Mengistu Haile Mariam when he came back from the 1978 war, the US walked back to him, and in some instances worked. So I think we misunderstand the US is, when I say we, in general, those of us who lobby around, and misunderstand the US priority. The US priority is not Ethiopia or the people, as you said, or the integrity of the people, or if you will, to use the current words that most people use, the existential of the Ethiopian people. Absolutely, I would say and stand tall to say that's not a priority. That, they will say, is your business. Figure out your problems, figure out how you can do. And that's why they watched the war of the 1970s all the way to 1991 until TPLF walked into Addis Ababa from afar. They will tell you that's not their business. And even now, one thing that Ethiopians need to know is the official position of the United States State Department is that they will stand for Ethiopia's territorial integrity at ease, and this is verbatim, I'm quoting. Number two, any change that is supposed to be coming from Ethiopia should be designed and done by Ethiopians. But what they don't tell you is that they finance and fund the very same authority that Ethiopians would like to change. So the war that's happening now in Amara and Oromia region, it could have ended within weeks if America pulls some of its financial purse from giving it to Arat Kilo.
Yeah, well, I think you just clarified some misconceptions we all have, and most of us are suffering from when it comes to the America's foreign policy for long. It has, and I remember someone saying that the American foreign policy has always been the same. Administration come and change, but the core of the tenets of the American foreign policy as they engage, especially with the third world country, including Ethiopia, has remained the same. And not to mention that America has always been even working with the dictators in Ethiopia. It's not because that the Mengistu was the dictator or the butcher, America ran away. It's not just because that Malaz Zenawi is an American by origin or is competing for the US Congress that they have been working with them. So, but what worries me more this time around is that they even stopped that pretension, right? They used to pretend. But now the emperor is necked. The European Union, just 2 days ago, as the mandate of this commission was being stifled a couple of days ago, announced a 650 million financial engagement with the Ethiopian government on the conditions that they are also going to release the budget support, depending on how their diplomatic relationship will unfold in the near future. So we see a lot of things going on at the same time, but at the ground level, when we put all these bricks together, I think it can give us some holistic picture of the state of diplomacy. So with that, why couldn't we stand together? Is it because the regime is stronger than the people, the power of the people? Is it that because we have irreconcilable interests? Or what is keeping us apart when it comes to diplomacy? For example, if I just mention one thing, yesterday I appeared on one media, TRT International, with the Auditor B representing the OLA and Ms. Maza Gidey of Tigray, and I myself representing the Ethiopian people or just representing myself. And even within that, and they are making it very clear that she was speaking for Tigray, and she invited us to speak for our own respective community. And then the other guy, of course, was there for OLA. And I said, at least when we speak the language of justice, let's make it inclusive, because justice is supposed to be universal. And that didn't bode well with most of the people. I said, maybe I found myself in the wrong place, or maybe expecting way too much. This is just a side remark of giving you, at least at elite level, that we do not have that engagement, that level of solidarity. So in any case, why couldn't we cooperate and forge a common strategy, as well as identifying the root causes of the problem?
Yes, I think that's a very good question, really, and that's the crux of the question around this issue. I think and that's why I am very protective, Mogus, although I was not even part of that. That's why I'm very protective of the 1960s, early 1970s youth movement in Ethiopia. Ideology guided them. I mean, they were all different, as you probably said, and as much as they are today, different groups, different language, different nationality, background, religion. But there were two overriding concepts that really guided them. Number one was fairness and justice to all people in Ethiopia. And that's what Walalen talked about. I mean, here was a young Amara guy who was speaking on behalf of Somalis. And probably at that time, there were no more than 5 Somalis at the entire university body, Haile Selassie University, at max, 5 students, although they were active. and he was talking for Kambata and what have you. So that deep-rooted fairness coming from some of the leaders who were very idealistic, untainted, that's an element that's missing today, that fairness and justice. The second thing that is missing in today's movement, and which is contributing to the fragmentation of our approaches, is we don't know what ideology to hang on to. In the past, at least for right or wrong reasons, the so-called leftist Marxist approach to solving oppressed people's issue, የጭቁን ህዝቦች ጥያቄ, no matter what, you could be living in the richest country in America, but you always have the homeless, you always have the dejected, you always have the poor. That time, it was an acceptable ideology for us to say we are working for the peasant, no matter who they are. He could be the Gojam peasant, the Oromo peasant, the one in Harar, whatever. That seems to have created, I think, a common vision for the elite, at least, to even sometimes agree on some names. For instance, most people don't know, but there was, besides EPRP and OLF and TPLF, the first group were called Ethiopian People's Liberation Front that went to Somalia, that included everybody. So today, what you have is acceptance by all of us. The likes of Shalak Georgis and Getachew Asafa, who is now in Tigray, who was the mastermind of the mayhem in the Somali region. He is endorsed by his own community and is still a member of the Central Committee, to my knowledge. The same with David Gorgis, or Walde Gorgis, Dawit Walde Gorgis, whose history is not as beautiful, but today a hero in some circles. Nothing would prevent Abdi Ile to come out today from jail and become a hero. When you have a community and a society like that, you don't expect that community to really fend off its enemy, its threat, its common threat, its common enemy, which is the lack of social justice, the lack of transitional justice, the lack of protection and preservation of the human soul and your own personal safety. If you can't have that kind of unity among yourself with the same ideology, you are open to the prey, and you can easily be hunted down, and that's exactly what's happening. Let me just say one thing. A lot of people hear that, for instance, Abdiile is and his team are in prison, and I'm talking about the former Somali president Jigjiga, who has been in jail for 5 years with no evidence to even keep him that long. But guess what, Mogas? The majority of the people are very poor people. I just tweeted yesterday a man who doesn't read and write, who was what in Amharic Hamal, a daily laborer, and he happened to be at the wrong place at the wrong time. 11 children that he used to feed by going on a daily basis to the street, do his daily laborer. There are millions of Ethiopians today who are under that circumstance. They could be lawyers also, they could be professors who are in jail. What we have is the demise of the community. I wrote in 1996 an article for the Ethiopian Review, and I was saying at that time the title was The Demise and Death of the Community. I thought we would come back from that. I never expected in 2023 we will even have the double death and the double demise of the Ethiopian community, and I think that's what we have today. So justice is the number one casualty that we have in our midst.
All right. Maybe, as you said, one of the reasons that any community, political community for that matter, fall prey for authoritarian regimes and dictators is when there is estrangement of community, alienation, right? That's estrangement in Hannah Arendt's language, or what we call what I regard that the Ethiopian political landscape is characterized, among others, by deep polarization of elites and social fragmentation. It's a kind of perfect storm, right? When there is a political polarization, usually it is because of the societal cohesions and the civil societies, active civil societies that save the nation. But when you have this two aspects, meeting without having an appointment, then I think it's very, very frustrating. So there is some form of alienation, and without overcoming this predicament, I do not see that the justice will come out of its barrack and we see the light. But with that remark, so let me share with you that what the Ethiopian government said yesterday. And when I say Ethiopian government, the state minister for communication of the PP regime just said that he was asked to, of course, to provide his own views by representing his government about the termination of the mandate of the commission. He said, let's don't talk about something which is buried already. And it really means that what is buried for me, it is justice simply. So metaphorically speaking, it's justice is being buried. And that is happening when the Pretoria Agreement is stillborn. It is only 11 months. And the wounds are not healing. The bloodshed is still flowing. And the people are suffering. And the cycle of violence is spreading like a wildfire. It is in the midst of all this that they are speaking about the burial ceremony of the justice system in Ethiopia. So what is really going on, and where is it coming from, and what do you make sense of that when it comes to accountability? We'll move on the ongoing violence, if you may allow me. I hope that you read the assessment by the Human Rights Council itself, whereby they identified the common risk factors, where they said that they do not trust the Ethiopian justice system and the government structure to render any justice, as well as that they fear actually a massive human rights violations and atrocity crimes will be committed if different courses are not taken. So with this, do you see any prospects of serving justice in Ethiopia? And if so, do you have any hope on the local justice system or the national justice system?
No, actually, you're right. That report says there is an ongoing serious violation, is widespread violation and instability in the country. But the phrase that I like most, which is really catchy for Ethiopia, is deeply entrenched impunity. Deeply entrenched impunity. This is something also that the white paper, the green paper for transitional justice that PP put together, also speaks in an indirect way by saying that we are not ready. Our court system is, and our justice infrastructure is not ready to really address some of the key issues that we are facing now. So the reason why I am a bit pessimistic about any justice to take place in Ethiopia is the transitional justice that everybody's talking about. Mogus requires, and the January 2023 ECRA, United Nations, also says and established the framework for it, mentions several key issues, including peace should be there, reconciliation should be there, and stability of the country and rule of law. If you have those issues, you can then talk about transitional justice and the imposition of, at the end, rule of law. Now, in Ethiopia, we are the opposite. Actually, as I argue, the core of Ethiopia, i.e. Amara, Tigray, and Oromo region, is in shambles, in a quasi-civil war. And even with Tigray, despite the cessation of hostility, forces of Eritrea are still there. People are dying, as they just reported. And in Amara region, we have to be braced in the coming few weeks and months, the intensification of the war. Now, how can anybody, any human being who is sane, think about peace and transitional justice and rule of law when we have seen the last 1 week, the Ethiopian National Defense Force massing armaments, helicopters, other airplanes that transport weapons in the Amara region to the extent as possible, where you can say Ethiopia's army today is gravitated towards Amara region. How can we talk about justice and peace and all that? So I think this is what's going to happen. We don't have justice, we don't have peace, we don't have sustainable peace, and transitional justice at this point in time would be the common language spoken by Addis Ababa, meaning Aret Kilo, and international funders, and there would be a mechanism fashioned to expand the so-called national dialogue, put that national dialogue as part of the framework in under which transitional justice will be carried. And the government of Ethiopia will see that as an opportunity to even get funding and other things to come to Addis Ababa. And the West will always say, there is something going on. Ethiopians should be participating in that to the extent possible. And as you know, Western intellectuals and leaders are married to the concept of incremental change, slow change. So basically, they will invest in the transitional justice and the national dialogue that Abiy and team have put together. So when this guy says justice has been buried, so to speak, in Amharic, I think what he's saying is what you guys have been struggling for, to address justice and to address the issues of victims and all that, is a bygone conclusion. Don't waste your time. We are moving along. Because some of the transitional justice concepts that the government put together even includes reparation. And you can tell that this is a lie. How many people are they going to give reparation? Millions of people? Where will that money come from? So that white paper, Mogus, when you read it, it is just sad. You can tell that some consultants whom the government commission put together, but it is completely detached from
I
the
even know
reality.
them, by the way, by name. And those guys used to be, as you said, a reasonable human being and a good lawyer, which turned out to be, as always, the case that the regime, they're serving the regime very well than even demanded, I would say.
Yes.
So they are
Good.
just colleagues, and those people I know, they have PhD, and two of them I know them. I read their books. It is very sad to witness that those reasonable human beings turned out to be attending the burial of justice. Actually, they are helping with the coffin. So,
Yeah.
yeah, just one thing
Unless
before
they mean, I just want to, unless they
yeah.
mean, we will come to these key issues after we finish with the Amara war, and then after we raise the Oromo resistance, then we can come back. I don't know, but go ahead. You put it very
Oh yeah,
well.
yeah. So
Yeah.
no. Actually, I just wanted to add. So we will continue with the reparation and uh, the uh, the issue in Tigray in particular is so telling for me. Just 3 days ago, that the Tigray regional government announced the National Day of Mourning for the befallen, right, and for the heroes, and you do not see that the federal government is not saying anything within the same country, even though they all are part of that mess, and they committed heinous crimes on a massive scale. And again, it's only the Tigray regional government which chose that way, even though it is so incomplete, even to issue an official apology that they were wrong. And then they are ready to compensate and make some reparations, or at least some semblance of transitional justice. And you can see a drama, we say a theater going on between Makali and even Addis Ababa. I just wanted to add that news, which came just three days ago, I think. Yeah.
Yes, I saw that, and I think again, singing on the graveyards of people who have died in vain for nothing at this point in time. When we look back, 1.5 million or 1.2 million people dying, $28 billion infrastructure being destroyed for a poor country, it's really sad. And uh, you're right. Again, Ethiopia is fragmented. Abiy is at this point in time choosing his wars. He doesn't want to offend the Tigray because he's engaged with a major group, i.e. the Amara. The Eritrean issue is hanging on his neck, which I believe, I have never believed that the Eritrean journey has finished. Mogus, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, I wrote about this, that the Asab issue is a nagging issue. It can never go away because the way many people see resolve it was to some It's just like you have a conflict around Walgait, and and I'm not saying one side is right, one side is wrong, but the very fact that a constituency is saying that it was resolved in hasty without consultation, and the other is saying no, it's ours. It's the same situation with ASAP, the largest Afar people being in Ethiopia, and it's my belief, and I've seen that in many times, Afar has gotten closer to the Amhara community for right or wrong reasons, and I'm not evaluating that, but that in itself gives enough ammunition for Abiy at this point in time to say that I can go back and walk back on what Malas did when it comes to Assab. So he has to really juggle all these issues. The fundamentalist issue coming from Somalia all the way through the Somali region, Al Shabaab, as you know, the very fact that uh, uh, Eritrea issue is hanging. Two major ethnic groups are in war with the federal government. Poverty levels are high. Basically, no one, and the fact that Ethiopia started at the world level, even at the regional level, has gone down so low that when the US Defense Minister Austin went to Djibouti, he did not even phone and call Abiy. When he talked to Hassan Sheikh Mohamud of Somalia, Djibouti president, and he took the time to flew all the way to Nairobi and give them the lead, for at least for America, the lead role that Kenya would be playing in the region. So Ethiopia is in a very bad box. I don't know if Abiy recognizes, and I heard him this morning some tapes where he's saying that the world is looking at him to solve big issues. What 300 billion trees that he planted, this and that. So I think the status of Ethiopia from human rights to the status it used to have is really very sad, and it's a fragmented. So he doesn't want to, at this point in time, offend the TPLF because he already offended Fano, which was his main supporter in the war against Tigray, and he's choosing at this point the lesser of the two evil for him.
So speaking of playing one against each other, I think he cannot continue like this forever because he might run out of engine at some point, not engine fuel at some point, because the cards he has, I think he has exhausted almost all of the Trump cards. I do not see that we can fall prey, or at least unless we are full, which seems the case with the Ethiopian intelligentsia and the elites. But in any case, that you mentioned that Abiy thinks, of course, he always thinks that he's a big man who can rescue the nation, even whose hand can heal the wounds of the neighboring countries, and then even bring peace, not only in Ethiopia, also in the rest of the world. One of the speech that he made during receiving the Nobel Peace Prize 3 years ago, exactly, actually. So he might believe that in that delusion. But even if he has a good intention, Faisal, that to be fair to him, it is not only that those people with bad intentions or evil people that destroys the nation. By the way, there is that saying. I think if you have come across it, it says the road to hell is usually paved with good intentions, right?
Yes.
That could be the case. Even if he has a good intention, maybe this is one of the ways that one of the reasons that he's destroying the nation, believing or maybe having that self-delusion or false consciousness of building or rebuilding the nation. That's just a comment. So, friend of us just commented, Mr. Chile, who is a lawyer as well. He said, what the Tigrayan elites did in Mekelle doesn't amount to official apology. He says that the TPLF, you can see it, the TPLF never said they were wrong, of course. So I also didn't say there is a asked official apology. I was comparing the two evils. So they at least went ahead due to the mounting pressure from the diaspora, from within and without, that somehow they try to play the game, or maybe they are trying to play the populist card or whatever. But I just pointed out the news, right? Because it was the news of the week.
Yeah.
So if you don't have pointers to comment on this, maybe you can comment generally. So last week, you were engaged in some kind of diplomatic shuffling in the United States. What happened? Did you come up with some solid strategy? Could you establish a mutual understanding of what is going on in Ethiopia, or what was the outcome of that proceeding?
Very good. Yeah, I think there were two wings to that. One was lobbying with the elected officials, Congress and the Senate, and I think the Amara brothers were not, and sisters were not with us. They were doing their lobbying separately. And then Somali, Afar, Oromo, Tigray, and then later on Sidama joined us, and we lobbied with several key congressional members, including the ranking Senate chair of the International Affairs Subcommittee, Ben Cardin, who really received us very well, and several other congressional members, and the chairwoman of the African Affairs, Sarah Jacobs, who is a Democrat. It was a very well received. I think people are, at least at the elected level, seem to be ready to see the Ethiopian quagmire for the first time. As a Somali, I'm always puzzled by the power that Ethiopia as such has on the imagination of Americans. There are a lot of Americans who are wishing good things to happen for Ethiopia. But I think they expressed to us and they said they are fed up with multiple groups coming to us. And that's your title, Mogus, fragmented approaches. But they want to make sure that, the war in Amara doesn't escalate. They will do everything possible. Even some of them, if they could, say that they will think if they can resuscitate the United Nations research, human rights issue by funding through other means. So they gave us good hope. We met with Ilhan Omar's office, about 6-7 congressional and Senate offices that we visited, some of them meeting us in person. And that was a very busy week with a budget week. The second day was the State Department. That was more of a unified meeting. The Amara team joined us. And I think, Mogus, maybe time is teaching people reality. It was a very civil interaction. And I was really impressed, even the empathy that transpired between the Amara group and the Tigrenya and the Oromo, because those are the three who are always pushing each other. They were civil to each other, they were listening to each other, and they were getting their point across the table so that they listen. I will just share with you, but I will not, expand, that we are in the final throes of releasing the common issues that we all met, and hopefully by tomorrow, or and we hope that the State Department would support some of this. But I think all of the issues that we are agreeing on should be issues that, at minimum, call to stop the war in Amara, in Oromo, and then proceed.
That is such apart from that takes us from that distressing news and discussions we have had.
So if I add one, you can go to the next. I came out from that intense 2-3 days in DC with the idea that said, I was dreaming, and we're allowed to dream. I don't think the Abiy government could have survived if these three forces, Amara, Oromo, and to a certain extent Tigray, reached some sort of agreement. This would be the life of the Ethiopian government as it exists. It would change. Either it will come to the table and sneeze and talk to people, or it will vacate the office. Mogus, the economic depth that it went down in terms of the country is alarming, from what we get from some intelligence groups who had meetings with us. Very bad shape. It cannot continue, but it's now getting advantage of the division and the fragmented approach. Even those who are warring don't have common agenda. So that's a bonanza for Red Kilo.
Yeah, I just would like to stress that final point. I always believe that the power of the people is always greater than the people in power, as some nicely put. I just say that the regime is in power because the people has not reclaimed their power. So,
yes.
So it doesn't mean that the power which is disenfranchised is a power. It is an active power with agency and a mobilization that is considered to be a power. So this fragmentation, disfranchised approach, even lack of a common agenda itself. There are common agenda, but lack of articulating rather. We have a common agenda, a trait actually. So we are in a survival mode or the existential trait. But everybody is singing his own melody, his or her own melody, even though we are supposed to articulate a common agenda. And as the saying goes, nothing unites human beings than adversity, right? The adversity is supposed to unite us. So with that, we are approaching towards our final point. Do you see a fault lines? What are the potential fault lines for the further escalation of violence and even as another round of violence? Because you see the Eritrean case has not been resolved, it's just suppressed. Even the issue with Tigray is still there. It is in a kind of precarious situation. And the relationship between Amhara and Tigray has not been resolved. And now we have a conflict in Oromia and the Amhara region. So what are those major sticking points or fault lines that we need to watch out as we go along? And then after that, we come to our concluding remarks, Faisal.
Yeah, I think as somebody who always respected the right of the Eritreans because now they have their own nation, but I think as long as Isaias is there, it's a fault line. The biggest fault line that we face today in Ethiopia and Eritrea and the region is along the axis of Tigray, Eritrea and Amhara region. Isaias will not let that fault line disappear. That's one. I think the other fault line you mentioned is between Amhara and Tigray around the regions that they claim. That is not resolved. The two may not really come into terms with creating a common approach. That's another area we need to look how you soften that, how you bring those two forces with their mixed baggage. That needs some really skillful people to really come up with a program to bury or suspend some of the contentious issues and rise to the level of the main issue. I think the Oromo Amhara area is also another fault line, but I consider that fault line more of a polemic and more rhetoric than real. I say rhetoric in the sense that it's really it's not some land that they are fighting over. It's more of a narrative kind, the history, the other issue. And my theory is, well, those take a long time to resolve the Amara Oromo elite disagreement. Is a continuum. It's an issue that will go on and on and on, and it is a slow process that will reach the crescendo, not in your time, not in my time, probably some future. It's a work in progress. Unless the two separate and go on their own way, the Amara Oromo intellectual debate will go on to perfect the history. So I'm not worried about that. The only issue is the government is utilizing and exploiting. When the Fano was with the Abiy, it was using Fano to show that the Amaras are with, bringing the old history of Minilik, and that offended the Oromos. Now, Abiy is potentially using segments of Oromo, not the whole Oromo, segments of Oromo, not the Wallaga, but the Jimma, the Shawa Oromo to fight his war. That can easily be managed, but that's another fault line. I think the other fault line I see is inside. I think for the first time, Abiy simultaneously antagonized two of the most powerful communities in the country. That's the Oromo and the Amara. And the Amara are deep state, in my opinion. When I say deep state, for long they have served the backbone of the public sector of the country, not the private sector, but the public sector, whether that is in bureaucracy or other levels. And when a state doesn't have the 100% allegiance of the people that work for it, you hear every day 10 captains, 20 colonels, this and that defected, and soon it will reach Addis Ababa, and that would be unsustainable for Abiy. I tweeted this right when the Fano war started, and I said this is not going to be similar to the other. Amara region is huge. It's not Tigray. He cannot lock it like he did with Tigray. He cannot fight with food because they have a lot of porous area. So I think the most dangerous fault line I see with Abiy is the internal fault line, where his own people will be his own enemy. And we can see that slowly in the near future. And I will bank on that fault line. With the Fano war going on, the fault line inside will increase.
All right, that is such a nice summary, Mr. Faisal. So with those fault lines, I might ask you one short question, and then we go to the final remark. So yesterday, look this one. I had an interview, short interview, as I said, with a Charity World, alongside with Oda Turbi, the gentleman, and then the other lady from Tigray. And so the question was, what would be the solution? And Oda said that as long as this regime is in power, don't expect anything. That means we need a regime change. And then I argued something, and then you can see, and I need your feedback on that.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, we do have a few minutes left. Or Mogus, go ahead if you need to respond.
Yeah, just 30 seconds. Speaking of regime change, I think we need a preconditions before even advocating for a regime change. I agree that we need to have a regime change at some point, but there must be structural change which would serve as a springboard for a regime change. We need to address the structural causes of the civil war, the atrocities, and the political differences. And otherwise, we are going to end up in a vicious cycle without laying the foundation for political change and the transformation. That's what I wanted to comment.
Okay. Oda, I'll just come back to you quickly because...
so that's it from my side. So one of the solutions, he said, we need a regime change. And then I just interjected saying, yeah, we agree on a regime change. We deserve as a society as a better governance. And of course, indeed, we need a political transformation like we discussed last time. But before that, we need to do a homework. Basically, that's what I'm trying to say. And so if you would like to reflect on that as a solution, and then in a way, this is a transition for us to come to a conclusion. So with that, may we hear from you your concluding remarks, what we need to do?
Yeah,
Mr. Faisal.
I think I'm closer to what you are saying. I think we don't want to repeat the same mistake we repeated with getting rid of TPLF or Oromara, with no structural approach and just getting rid of the evil right now. That is suicidal. I think I buy the idea that you are saying we need a structural approach to the issue. I buy and borrow some concepts from your colleague Lidetu, who says that the very regime that is sitting is part of the solution if we want to transition. You don't want to put this regime, well, worst case scenario is to do what TPLF EPRDF did, which is to fight till death, and one side will win and that side will walk to the, and that will take a long time. And that will also put the existing government, what you call in Amharic, Abiy and team will make sure that they destroy, they kill as many as they want, until he escapes from the country with his family and some money. And that is also an old-fashioned type. So I buy the idea that says they have to vacate, but if they have to vacate, we have to see a systemic change, even at times using them as part of the approach. And I don't wish to go to that point where the only alternative is a regime change by force. I think a lot of forces are calling for that. When I went to DC, I heard a lot of voices, friends that I reconnected, who are saying regime change now. The cost of that is what we have seen in Tigray. I'm always going back, Mogus, the day that TPLF said we will conduct our own election, and Aret Kilo said, no, you cannot do it. I think that was an administrative legal juggle between the two. That should not have taken the country. I don't buy the theory, the other theory of the army and whatever. I never bought from the beginning, because governments create what they call quote unquote reality on the ground when they want to do something. But that whole thing that started with the election could have been settled through negotiation and through reconciliation, what have you. And today, 1.2 million people and $28 billion infrastructure, the two regions that advanced at least in the last 30 years, could have had what they gained now. In Amara region, you have millions of kids who are not attending school. The same with Tigray, 80% of the health infrastructure has been destroyed. You can never recover. What had happened in Amara and Oromo and now Tigray, you cannot recover that for the coming 30 years. I don't know if Abiy knows. I don't know if his opposition knows. That's why this automatic uh, uh, regime change by force, by any means necessary, will not work. But I think if we can work on the edges, and this is Faisal, the liberal, talking, if we can work on the edges to work on a genuine national dialogue, inclusive dialogue, with no restrictions, with the government taking the back seat, like Mandela and his associate in South Africa took, and give this process to a third party where, see, the current transitional choice and dialogue Abiy and his team want is the one that's creating regime change request, simply because you cannot be the killer, you cannot be the one who arrests, you cannot be the judge, and you cannot be the one who says Mogas and Faisal are right, they have to get out of the country. So if Abiy wants to save this country, which a lot of people will just laugh at it, and I laugh myself, because he hasn't saved the Tigray. He believes in bringing them to their knee. But again, as far as we can push the envelope, as far as we can lobby, and I think if Ethiopian voices unite, particularly, and now Somalis have joined, the Somali, Oromo, Amara, and Tigray, and we brought in DC, Afar, who was really very justice oriented, Mogus. The Afar delegation touched issues that angered some people, and also tell others the truth, and nobody expected that those voices in the past. The Sidama is endorsing what we will come up, hopefully. I think if we can get that unified voice, war will not be necessary, and the Abiy regime would be in a precarious. And lastly, imagine if the Amara and the Oromo civil societies come together, Mogas, in Addis Ababa. I would imagine, I don't have numbers, but they would constitute 90% of the residents of a 4.5 million highly educated, highly urbanized population with some serious social service demands: transportation, housing, jobs, food. If the elected officials and politicians of Addis Ababa come together and march in the Gandhian style, let them beat them, let them bleed them, let the world see them, let the Mararas and the Amara leaders and others come and hold hands and march in front of the American embassy in mass. I think they may arrest more people, but sooner or later, Abiy's government will change or will vacate the seat, and that would be less costly, in my opinion. And that's where I supported Liderto's approach to this whole issue. When I listened to him, Abiy's life, his regime's life, would be either limited or changed to the better.
That is a nice way of ending our special conversation. But before that, I think you may need to reflect on the role of the international community as well. Maybe last point. What would be the role of the international community?
So the role of the international community would always. Ethiopia is a very key country, from my understanding and study. From the days of the Kanyao station, well, it even predates the Second World War. Haile Selassie being a player in that, all the way to the Kanyao station days, all the way to now the Mallas era with the war on terror, which Ethiopia benefited a lot. It is considered by the State Department, quote unquote, anchor state for the Horn of Africa. Now that's lost a bit, but still infrastructurally it's there. I think the international world would like to see three things, and I will end with that. They will see opposition and lobbyists and advocacy to be united and come with one voice to Washington. As much as America's policy is opportunistic, Mogus, but it's also the devil that you can never do away with. It's the devil that you need. So if the voice is there, then you can push them to accept some of your demands. So that's one. But it needs that voice to be number one. Number two, I think we need forums in person or otherwise that people talk like this to bring ideas together and narrow the gap that divides the people. And some of you have started, and I watch here and there, and it's really welcomed. It doesn't come in one day, but slowly it's coming. Empathize with our brothers and sisters in Tigray. I was one of the voices that really got a lot of beating because people could mix or couldn't differentiate between sympathizing with TPLF, whom I've been critical since 1991-92, and standing with the people of Tigray. I think we need to do exactly the same thing with the people of Amara. I think Abiy's hand doesn't differentiate between Amara, Oromo, and Tigray. So now the two societies that are getting the beating from Arat Kilo are Amaras and Oromo, and we need to use these opportunities to come together. I think Amaras and Oromo and Tigray need to talk behind the scene and iron out some of their issues. That's the second. What the international community needs for us to do, we don't want weapons, we don't want anything. We want to use its purses, and I said that in front of them, to use its purse to tame and discipline this fascistic regime. That is the World Bank, the IMF. See, Samuel Huntington, who was America's preeminent political scientist, in his book Clash of Civilization, talks about how World Bank IMF used. He basically says that the West uses the IMF and World Bank to get what it wants, the results that it wants. The same thing is true. If America wants to discipline or push Abiy against the wall with the help of Europeans, who, as you said, bandwagon with America, they can easily do that. So what we want from the West, we want the West to use its purse, its power, to not do a regime change, because that's for the Ethiopians, but to not support the war machine that is supporting, because some of the money that they give indirectly in disasters, you heard some of the food that was meant for refugees and displaced people were being converted into flour and being shipped to southern Sudan. And I talked to Somalis who are in southern Sudan, who are businessmen, who literally bought those and resold that in the open market.
I have always said that nothing is so disgraceful than taking food out of the mouths of the most needy and those on the verge of death, and especially from those people under your custody, those people whom you are supposed to protect, and you turn out to be a predator, even when you are not providing. So a couple of issues before we conclude. One, as to the national dialogue mechanism, I think we need to reinvigorate the process. I think you already hinted at that. So as it stands, I do not expect that it's going to be inclusive, transparent, and effective. So there should be some process of reinvigorating the process itself, not to start the wheel again, but at least to reinvigorate it. That is one thing I would like to add. Then the other one is freedom has never been free, as you said. We have to start now than later. And the road to social change has always been bumpy, right? So the road is bumpy and tortuous. We have to take that route if we would like to bring about freedom, or at least regain the freedom we lost, and ensure justice, which is very it's very bleak now, as we have discussed, but still we have to take that road. And finally, I just would like to reiterate what I've already mentioned, that the power of the people are always greater and better than those in power. So with that, I think this is our first ever special episode, and today's podcast is Ethiopia Today, where we have discussed on cross-cutting current issues pertaining to the political crisis in Ethiopia, as well as the state of diplomacy and the justice. So as the Pretoria Agreement is nearing its first anniversary, we would like to wish and stand together with the victims of the war. And we say no to war, irrespective of where it is originated, against whomever it is. And I hope that I will take over the task you gave it to me. I've already started it, and we have been holding those discussions in Amharic, but I may bring those very same people together and host some panel maybe at the end of this month, and we'll work together. And thank you very much for today. And if you have anything that you'd like to say, the floor is yours. Otherwise, we shall end our today's special podcast with this.
Yeah, no, thank you very much, Mogus. I really appreciate what you're doing and, how you approach issues as far as Ethiopia is concerned. No, I think there is the chance, as I agree with you, that the opportunity is there to work around the national dialogue, but we have to restructure it. We have to redesign it. We have to make sure that voices who are out there have party. I think it has to go beyond the people. The design of it should go beyond the people who have been hired. It has to include people who are outside the system, as you say, reintegrate that, make transparent and broaden the scope. And I think, make it a genuine tool. It's not a tool, national dialogue is not a tool to silence voices. It is to regain, again, as you used it, regain the freedom that people lost by talking to each other and resolving issues. And with that, thank you very much for welcoming me.
Thank you very much, sir. And ladies and gentlemen, and I would like to thank my guest on behalf of you and myself. The Hasab Gabata, our buffet of ideas, is always grateful to our guests, including Mr. Faisal. And with this, have a good day, a good night, and see you with another edition of our special podcast. Thank you very much. Have a good day.
You're welcome. Thank you.